Today, we want to deep dive into the values on which Emergent Humanity Code was founded.
Living and creating in ways that multiply resources for all or for the whole.
The concept of agency is really a critical part of how we really move forward as a species.
A way that we can start approaching that is by asking ourselves the questions, does this belief system actually serve me?
We want to welcome all of those who earnestly want to evolve towards these values.
So it's that beautiful interplay of self and the collective.
It's not a linear journey. There's no start and end point.
If we are able to fully grasp it, and if we are able to fully implement it, that we really are serving the highest good of each and every one of us.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. We are Emergent Humanity Code. Our aim is to create a world in which every being, system, and model aims to serve the highest good of all. Once again, I'm Cal Naika, your host for today, alongside my awesome team, Priya, Marlon, and Mel. And if you're unfamiliar with who we are or what we do, you can catch up with episode 1 of the podcast on this platform. So with that, today we want to deep dive into the values on which Emergent Humanity Code was founded. The reason we've decided to dedicate a whole episode to this is because we believe these values not only emulate the successful emergent vision of the future, but it can also be applied to our personal lives as well. And we spent days, weeks, months developing them because it was critical that they not only reflect the vision that we're trying to create, but that they also remain relevant in the decades to come, in the decades of change that will come. So with that, we've established a wheel of values with 5 critical values. Priya, if you'd like to take us in and lead us into that discussion.
Thank you. So I think we were very intentional about creating a wheel of values and not having the values stand in isolation. And the reason behind that is coming together as a set of 5 values. It's important that none of these values are looked at as higher or lower than the other. They actually operate in synergy, and it's through the synergy that they create coming together that we feel the new emergent magic and the new insights and ways of operating will come through. And the value that I'll touch on first is abundance through proliferation. So for most of us, we are familiar with the concept of abundance and an abundance mindset. And I think quite similarly, the growth mindset. And for me, the abundance or the growth mindset is absolutely critical to transformation. So anything that you want to transform into a new state, you need to have a growth mindset, the mindset of by applying certain thinking, by believing that I can expand resources, etc., I will create something fundamentally new. Where it fell short as abundance on a concept on its own was we looked around and said, even though we think so much of abundance in the world today, and that concept, it can actually drive people into a sense of self-interest. So creating abundance for self or for the people I care about, but not actually creating more net abundance in the world. And so when we were deliberating over this, we crafted what we came to call abundance through proliferation. And the definition for that is simply living and creating in ways that multiply resources for all or for the whole. And so that's being deliberate and intentional about creating abundance for self, that at the same time is doing so by creating abundance for others, by creating abundance for the whole. That's people, planet, and we believe that that's the next iteration of how we apply this abundance and growth mindset.
Yeah, Priya, I love how you're saying the proliferation is such a core part of the abundance perspective. If I think about it though, there's a lot of people in the world who operate and think that they are doing things in the name of abundance for the whole. So, as an example, if I am a very wealthy person and I am a billionaire, and I think that I'm really great at the way that I allocate resources, I may believe that it's in the best interest of the whole for me to have more abundance and for me to have more resources, more wealth, more money, all those types of things. So, in a situation like that, what would you say differentiates the perspective of the abundance for self is now excessive? It's actually not through proliferation.
I think we see a lot of that currently in the way the world operates. We see a lot of monopolies, and we see a lot of individuals with much more resources, etc. So it's really valid because it's the way many things actually are. So part of the challenge or the problem I see with that way of being or way of thinking is it actually undermines the intelligence of the collective and the intelligence of others. So it starts to have this perspective of, I know better. I, as whoever I am, the individual or an organization, and I can do for you or for others something that they are not empowered or don't have the ability to do for themselves. And that inherently contradicts then the way we see the power of collective intelligence, and what can come off, collective intelligence. I think I shared in episode 1 a quote I love, and a previous manager used to say to me that, and used to say in general, that it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're never smarter than the collective. So we have problems when we start thinking that we know better about other people's well-being than they know for themselves. And then the second part of that that's really important is this element of choice and understanding that every other person, and maybe even if we extend that to just life in general and living beings, people have inherent choice. And when we try to strip someone of their choice, we are taking away something that they should fundamentally have. And it's that idea of choice or agency. I should be able to control my own destiny on the things that I am in charge of. So stripping someone of choice is also problematic. And so the idea of abundance through proliferation then is creating abundance for self, not limiting that, but to the extent that it creates abundance for the whole and doesn't limit anybody in their choice. So it's that beautiful interplay of self and the collective, without needing to sacrifice either one of those. It's the highest good of self and highest good of the collective.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned agency there. It's actually the value I want to speak to. I think it integrates a lot with the abundance to proliferation, as you mentioned. It's not a case of isolation, but a collective. It's understanding about being your best self, but showing up also for the collective, in service of the collective. And I think that's really at the heart of our definition of agency, which is celebrating the freedom and autonomy of an individual's expression that serves the highest good of all. It's a unique concept. I think it speaks to both the autonomy of a person as well as their service within a collective. So it's a very it sort of transcends two singular mentalities that we normally have, which is one acting for the collective and one actually acting in a singular fashion. But now it integrates both of those. So I think it's a very interesting concept. It helps us understand that in life that we make our decisions often, and I think we're all guilty of it, where we do it to serve our own wants and needs, or the wants and needs of our immediate loved ones or organization or whatever it may be. But once we understand that everything we do has a sort of a knock-on effect on each other, and it's all impactful on a society as a whole, then we understand that there's a collective vision and a collective goal that we're trying to achieve amongst all of us as citizens of the planet. So I think the concept of agency is really about showing up as our best selves, but with always having the collective's visions, the highest good of all. I think is a critical part of how we really move forward as a species. Yeah.
Yeah, Marlon, that's such a good point. And I love the way you describe agency and speak to it so passionately because I know, agency is one that really resonates with you. I think I'm curious as to why agency specifically.
It speaks to me because I see it so much in the world around me. I've seen such an evolution in so many different practices of our life, our existence, work, professional, social, all of that. That sort of it's moving towards the concept of agency without fully understanding that if we are able to fully grasp it and if we are able to fully implement it, that we really are serving the highest good of each and every one of us, all of us that as I said, citizens of the planet. I think for me, one of the examples that comes to mind is well, I've said before, I think on the previous pod that I'm an avid sports fan. I've competed in many team sports over the years. And I think when I go back to my days in junior sport, I remember realizing that it was very sort of regimented in roles and responsibilities of individuals as to what they do or what they provide towards within a system. So, for example, for when I played for the football team, I was a defender. My job was primarily to defend. So I knew when the attackers were in the other half trying to score the goals for our team, I basically sat back and waited for my time to act and react. But I think modern football and modern psychology on team sport has changed so vastly in that it doesn't exist like that anymore. There are no just defenders and just attackers. There is a collective vision for the team. There is an outcome, a desired outcome, an objective to playing the game, which is obviously scoring goals and winning matches. So I think for that collective to really thrive, we realize that we can't defend with 4 or 5 people and then attack with 4 or 5 people. We have 11 people on this team, and 11 people are part of the attack, and 11 people are part of the defense. I think once we realize that getting the ball into the opposition's net is all 11 of our responsibilities, and keeping the ball out of our own net is all 11 of our responsibilities, then we start acting, we start showing ourselves to the best of our abilities that we hold within us. But we always, at all times, have the collective vision and system in mind, in place, so that everybody leans on everybody else, everybody's integrated, everybody's moving in the same direction. So I think that shift in sports psychology over the last, I would say probably last couple of decades, was really something that became apparent to me. And then as I looked at it with a broader lens, looking at I realized it's really expanded to all facets of our life, where we really look to understand that, like Mel was posing the question, if abundance is just for myself, if technically then I'm taking away from somewhere else. So am I helping the collective as a whole? And in the long run, us as a unit, as a collective, will lose, will fall behind in that way. So I think that in the football scenario, I learned that you've got to adapt. You've got to learn to understand what the collective vision is and direct all your skills and resources and maximize them within the realm of the objectives or the collective vision of the team. I think that's the thing that really, that's why it really spoke to me.
Yeah, that's a cool example. Because as I think about it now, as a football fan myself, I think it works in the opposite way as well, where we see like as players are serving the collective vision of the team, we also see the individual performance, the quality of an individual player has improved so much over generations, over decades, um, in a way that it's not just serving the collective of a team, it's serving the collective of the sport itself and of the quality of the individual players that we're now seeing as well. So yeah, that's a great example.
Absolutely. And I think with that, I think you realize also that the collective vision there, establishing that collective vision really changed everything. As you said, it changed the sport and it's now changed society holistically. And I think if it may be controversial, people like to have generational arguments about quality of sports athletes. Uh, Maybe Maradona was better than Messi, or Messi is better than Pele, or whatever the case is. But that's on an individual level. But really, if we look at the teams of yesteryear, if the best teams of yesteryear had to compete with the best teams of today, there'd really be no competition. Teams of today, just not by the individual quality at all, but the sheer mentality of the group, the sheer psychology of the unit will surely overcome and surely defeat those of the past. So I think we've all understood that within that, and if we are able to extend that to all areas of our life, like football teams have progressed so far over these decades, I see no reason why all spheres of our life can't move in that trajectory.
So true. And I think the sports example that you guys are using is such a beautiful example of agency. It's also a really beautiful example of evolution. So there was a time where it would be defenders do a specific thing, attackers do a specific thing, or if someone's really talented, they go rogue and they do their own thing. So if a striker wants to strike at the expense of the team, they do their own thing. And the sport has actually evolved into a space where everyone has a place to thrive and the collective does as well. And I think that evolution comes through creating parallel practices, which is the next value. So with parallel practice, it's really just about operating outside of the pre-existing systems and narratives that have already been built. And a process that we love to use to do this is just to start by questioning, then unlearning the things that don't serve us anymore, and then actually building new practices and processes that are going to progress us and move us forward. We often hear in the business environment words like thinking out of the box, parallel thinking, innovation, just finding new ways. And I think parallel practice just takes it one step further. It's taking the new thoughts, the new approaches, the new perspectives, and putting them into actual practical models that serve the future of humanity and our planet. So if you look at it quite practically, an example of this could easily be a previous thought, and even sometimes a thought that people have now is, for me to be financially successful, I must have relationships that suffer, or I must have something else in my life that's now conceded. And I think a way that we can start approaching that is by asking ourselves the questions, does this belief system actually serve me? Does it serve the relationships in my life? Does it serve my career even? Because if I'm working all the time, I'm burning out, I may have a lack of perspective because all I do is work. So does this really serve me as a human being as a whole? And then once we ask those questions, we say, how do we unlearn the parts of this that doesn't work for us? But also more importantly, how do we keep the parts that actually do work and then evolve on those things? So once we start with a process like this where we question, we unlearn, we apply some parallel thinking, we don't just leave it there. We say, okay, how do we now take this and build new models that are going to progress us and move us forward? How can we apply practices and practical steps so we now create a system that actually serves us in a better, more meaningful way? And I know the example I use now is quite a micro example. It speaks to our personal lives, but it can be applied across macro environments, business, government, society. if we just start questioning, unlearning, and really building in new processes and systems that are completely different, that can serve us all, parallel practice will be able to support us all.
Yeah, those are really, it's a really good example as well on the micro level, because I think we all have places in our lives where we know things are not working for us anymore. The pace of our lives is changing so rapidly, like our systems, our practices are constantly needing to be updated. So it's easy to kind of, look at our personal lives and go like, yes, like parallel practice, is such a good concept. It's so practical. But when I think of it on the broader scale, I think the question that kind of comes to mind for me is, how practical is parallel practice across the board, on like across industries, including, for example, industries that are more traditional or rigid. So I kind of think like, yeah, if you're a marketing agency, for example, it might be easy to go like, yes, we are, we adopt parallel practice. This is a cool way that we think and we approach things, and it sounds great. But then if you think of, say, something that's more sort of structured and regulated, like a doctor or a healthcare professional, how can those people apply parallel practice? Is it practical? Because you don't just want to, throw away all these established methodologies that have, taken us hundreds of years to get to in the first place.
Great question, Cal. I think it's something I've also grappled with, because when we started uh, developing and formulating this idea of parallel practice, like, no, there's certain structures. It's just always been done that way. It will never be responsive to change. And I think, but the more you delve into it, the more you realize it are those regulated, those rigid, seemingly rigid environments that require parallel practice more than any other, if you ask me. You mentioned something like the healthcare industry, or being a doctor. I think in that, if you look at that, uh, there are there are continuously new ailments, and even the illnesses and diseases that we have or we're aware of, they're ever evolving. They're always changing. I mean, we don't have to look back too far. Just a couple of years ago, when COVID-19 first impacted the world, uh, we started developing vaccines and things like that. But immediately the virus itself started to evolve, started to change. So I think you realize then that if we stay in our old systems and in our traditional ways and become too rigid and if we're not adaptable enough, then we are creating that gap, because that the healthcare system is there to alleviate those ailments and illnesses. But if those illnesses are evolving and getting smarter, and we are staying in our outdated and obsolete thought processes, then the gap to the solutions is ever growing. So I think it's absolutely critical for those types of industries, trade, to very, very much look to be adaptable, to always be, like Mel said, to always be questioning how we go about things. We have successes that we've had, and we've had failures. So how can we draw on those successes? What can we use? What learnings can we take from those failures and adapt an improved system, an improved model, a better way of treating patients in this scenario? And really, it's adaptable to across all industries. Regulations change. Regulations need to change, and they will change. New regulations are formed all the time, and it's done out of necessity. Regulations are changed, systems are changed, all out of necessity. Just like I said, 3 or 4 years ago when COVID hit, there was an absolute necessity for us to create there was this virus that we've never seen or heard of before. And everything's changed, from a layman to how we live our life, to doctors and industries, to how regular businesses operated. Everything had to change. So I think it's not about saying like, oh, okay, something is too structured; it'll never change. We have we have a tendency to feel that way, but if you look at it over time, when the necessity is there, everything does change. So it's just about understanding that the necessity is always there. So we should be ever changing, just like the world around us is ever changing, and our challenges faced are ever changing. Our objectives may change. That's why I think it's important, even on the whole, that our values are robust and adaptable. We really that's it's why we're looking at creating all of these values across that are adaptable over time and across all spheres of life.
We've spoken about things on all different levels, the macro, the micro, the individual. We've talked about agency as well, which spoke so much to how the individual connects to the greater whole. And for me, that brings us to the fourth value, which is inclusion. I think that was something that was so fundamental, because what we mean by inclusion is that we want to welcome all of those who earnestly want to evolve towards these values and this vision that we have, irrespective of where they are on this continuum, meaning that you don't need to be a certain kind of person or believe in everything we believe or everything the community does. And importantly, you don't need to be a perfect human or an idealist, striving for perfection. If you earnestly want to move yourself and the world towards greater oneness, kindness, and wholeness, then we embrace that. You are embraced in this community. And this is a space for you. I also think it's important, like when we speak about inclusion and the continuum, to know that all of us, regardless of who we are, even the four of us, sitting here today, we're all in the continuum. And the point at which we are fluctuates. It's not a linear thing of I start here, I end there. It depends on where you are in the moment. It depends on your circumstance. You might feel like, I've got it going on today, and something happens a month from now, and you feel like, oh, I feel like I'm almost starting over at this point. I'm totally in a different space than I was at a month ago. And so this is to say that it's not a linear journey. There's no start and end point, and the continuum itself may expand as, the collective starts to expand. So regardless of where you are, it's about, if you want to be an intentional being, consistently trying to reshape yourself into a higher version for yourself and a higher version um, for the collective, then this is the place you just start. It's from where you are in the moment. What can you do to move yourself a little bit forward today from where you are?
And I think I'd also like to add that part of the magic around this is going to be diverse perspectives. So we're not expecting that everybody who joins and is a part of the community in whatever way, shape, or form agrees wholeheartedly with everything or with each other. In fact, it is the different perspectives that will make it a strong, thriving, robust community. As long as we're grounded in the ethos of wanting to serve the highest good of all, along with the highest good for self, and really earnestly, truly wanting to be of service and to create a life that is thriving for self, but also serving others. I love the body analogy, so I use it quite often. And it is just coming back to that thing of we can't have all of the same cells. The body just wouldn't work. So you can't have all neurons or all heart cells. We have to have these diverse cells and these diverse organs to make sure the whole organism called the body works together. And so likewise, in our community and in how we move forward, we want to ensure that there's diversity with the intent to work as one cohesive unit for the future.
I'm hearing you guys so much on that perspective, and I love inclusion as a value. And just the way in which you guys are speaking about anyone who just earnestly wants to do a little more, be a little more, this is definitely the place for them. From a realistic point of view, though, what happens if someone isn't just a person who wasn't a great parent yesterday, or isn't someone who wasn't a great friend? What if they have a really checkered past and they've had a questionable past and they've now come to a point in their lives where they're saying, I want to actually serve the highest good of all? Is this the kind of space for them, and how does that affect other people that are part of our community?
Absolutely, it's the space for them. Why I believe that, Mel, is that you see, I think all of us have things in our past. We've all got a bit of history. We've got some skeletons in our closet. We've got things that we're not proud of. I think, like Cal said, we are imperfect beings. So there will be several instances of imperfect actions. But I think what the concept we're trying to really embrace here is that if you are earnestly wanting to make that change, that movement towards this future, towards this collective vision, then I feel that the error the errors of your past uh, should not preclude you from joining such a movement. In fact, if anything, it should be part of it because you've identified this error. You've realized the error of your ways. You realize that it did not serve the highest good of all, and that you wanna find a better way to exist, to a better way to live. If you want to, again, if your desire is to make that change and you want to take action against it, right? It's not a case of I've made mistakes in the past, I'm sorry. It's about saying, okay, I've learned from them. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to help my society, my community around me. This is everything I want to do. This is my vision for the future. These are people that have the vision, that have a shared vision, and I want to sit with them and I want to talk about how do we go about doing this. How do we practically create these systems in the world that we live. So I think absolutely that this is the place for them. It's really a question of intention right now. And if your intention is for that change, then absolutely it's the place for you.
That's such a good point. We're talking about collective good, collective, highest good of all. I think being able to include just about anyone who, wants to move towards these values, it actually serves us as the collective to know that individuals, as you said, Mel, with, questionable pasts or checkered backgrounds, or any of us who might feel, we've done something wrong and maybe there's no hope, or where do I start? Like, there's a space for you to start moving towards becoming a better person for yourself and for others. So it uplifts all of us to know that there is a place for someone to go if they feel like this is my time now to actually move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for us to ground ourselves in the fact that we don't in any way condone harming others or being hurtful in any way. So it's not a sense of condoning any actions or anything that we think contradicts the values. What it is saying that if we're truly inclusive and if we're truly wanting a world that is better as a whole in the future state, then everybody who resonates with that and wherever they are and whatever they've experienced or had happen in the past, if they truly want to have that going forward, that ethos, and are invested in showing up in that way, then we want to create the space for it, rather than saying no, you have to be a perfect human before you can join in this community or this future. We none of us would qualify either as perfect humans. I think with that, I'll go into the last value of humanity. I think this idea of humanity is really rooted in the idea of being humane. just applying the sense of understanding what it means to value life, to see life as sacred. And so when we have that view of all life is sacred, we start to apply humane lens and empathetic lens in everything we do. We've also been quite intentional, and we might have mentioned it a few times here today, this idea of the highest good of all, and it's an ethos and a part of our mission. And we were intentional about not saying the greatest good of all, but the highest good of all. And the reason for that was, if you start to say the greatest good of all, you essentially have to do an equation. And you have to have some pluses and minuses. And it's the minus part that we're concerned about, because when you eliminate pieces, you're saying there are people that are disposable, or there are the rights of certain people that are disposable, or the choices, because there's a larger amount of good to be had somewhere else. And when you think of the sacredness of life, then you realize, or you come to the conclusion that nothing is disposable. Nothing that's valuable in and of its essence as a life form is disposable. Therein came the understanding that we're actually aiming for the highest good. We start to look at every person and every life form as having a highest good, and you start to respect that. So we've been clear about the highest good of all.
When we're speaking of humanity, though, we say wisdom, power, divinity. And I think these words can also sometimes feel like they come with some connotation for different people in different aspects. So what are we speaking of when we talk about wisdom, power, divinity? Is it something religious? Could it be, it could be taken in that context, or is it something more spiritual?
I'll tackle that. I think when it comes to spirituality, there's at the heart of it, we all have an essence. We have something within us, a spirit, an essence, something that we believe is our highest form of ourselves, or the truest, deepest part of us. And so for me, when we talk of spirituality, it is really just that truest essence of self. But beyond this idea of spirituality, if we just think of cognitively, behaviorally, physiologically, our capabilities as humans, this idea of wisdom and divinity and power is really just about honoring our capabilities. So we have some of the most amazing capabilities that we're aware of, that we've seen on the planet. For example, if I just take wisdom, this ability that we have to be able to understand who we are, so understand self, understand ourselves in relation to others, even have a lens of empathy, put ourselves in the position of others and wonder or be able to understand how they would feel, to the extent of even being able to understand how an animal might feel, or how plants and trees, what their experience might be like. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful set of capabilities that we have in our bodies, our minds, and our behavior, etc. And so the ability then to think of the choices and to apply time as a construct and say, how would this choice affect different people, different things, different planets, our planet, differently, those abilities come into the form of wisdom. So wisdom is just being able to say, with all of these mental and physical capabilities we have, how do we make the choices that resonate with our truest, deepest parts of ourselves and act in the highest way possible? Power is simply the ability then to act on that. So we don't just have the wisdom or the abilities and the ability to tap into wisdom. We have the power to act on it. And that's an incredible endowment. It's an incredible gift that we have, or that we've evolved. And finally, for me, divinity, it's one of my favorites. It's the ability to just see and acknowledge sheer beauty for its existence. This idea of the sacredness of life just for being. And whether that's looking at a newborn baby or a tree or a sunset and just taking in its beauty. It's not beautiful because it does something for us. It's beautiful just because it is. And that's the ability or the gift of divinity that we have. We're able to see that and actually conceptualize it. So with that, it's this idea of humanity being linked to wisdom, divinity, and power may have a spiritual context, and it also has just a real context of honoring the abilities that we have, the physical and mental and cognitive abilities that we have.
That's an awesome way to wrap up the values. So those are our 5 core values, guys. As always, there's so many good nuggets that I pull myself just from having these conversations with you guys. But it is also a lot. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of big concepts. And as always, we like to leave anyone listening with something that they can take practically into their life in the coming weeks, that they can just carry with them, a little nugget here and there that they can take from the podcast. So I think today's question that I want to throw to you guys is, how will you apply one of these values into your life in the next week?
So I think for me, the value that I'd want to apply this week would be agency. I think we sometimes get so caught up in our own perspectives. I definitely get caught up in my own perspective. And it's easy to see things from the view of self. So this person hurt my feelings, or I did that for that person, or I showed up in this way. So I really just want to stop and ask myself more this week, are my actions in service of both myself and the whole? And just doing that consistently throughout the week. I also want to get really practical with it. So just reflecting at the end of every day, asking the same question, are my actions in service of myself and the whole? Catching thoughts in my mind before they turn into actions, because sometimes it can become a story of, I did so much, or this person did this, and treating myself as separate from other people. So just catching the thoughts before it turns into an action and doing something about it. And finally, I think I would be asking for feedback. So from the team at work, from family, friends, anywhere I spend my time, just getting feedback on how I'm showing up and if I am actually showing up in the service of the whole, because we don't always see ourselves with a true lens, and just using those things to apply agency in my life this week.
I think for me, the value that I want to make a concerted effort to practice more is that of inclusion. Really, the principles that underpin the value of inclusion are those that I want to try to implement a little bit more in my life. I think I'm guilty of, like most people, uh, placing judgment on people, maybe based on past actions or something they've said or done or something in the past. And I think once they hold that space in my mind, I'm always painting them with that brush. So I think I also have to realize, just like each and every one of us are changing and evolving and developing our mindsets, and I need to be more open-minded in my personal life of when I meet people. I'm fortunate enough to meet a lot of people, both people I've met before and new acquaintances. So I think it's about not having those preconceived notions, or not placing so much reliance on them that I have already formulated or judged an opinion of this person and decided that no, this person is not somebody I want to integrate with or be involved with on these spheres of my life. So for me, it will be really about communicating more with people. It's about chatting, have a conversation, get an understanding of where they are. Do we have shared values in terms of our futures, our aspirations similar? If so, is it possible? Can we collaborate? Can we work together? Can we figure out how we want to go about improving ourselves, improving the society? So I really wanna try to implement that where I don't box people in my mind. I want to be more open to, as I said, to the principles of inclusion, where I really engage with people and really try to establish their intention, my intention, and if there's a space for that collaboration, absolutely be open fully to it. I think the us within our movement and the creating of the community has really opened my eyes to this concept of inclusion and sort of holding our judgment a little bit, trying to understand where a person is in the continuum. It may be where you were last week or a few weeks ago. It may be where you want to be one day. So I think those conversations, as long as the values are aligned, then I think the conversations that you'll have would be amazing. So I just want to be more receptive to people within the value system of inclusion.
Yeah, those are such good ones. I think for me personally, what really resonated for me, and that I want to take into my week is parallel practice. As we were speaking about it as well, I thought, in my personal capacity, it can be so easy for us to just fall into certain routines and practices and habits. And even, for example, in our work lives, most of us go into an organization or a business or a team where there are already practices implemented, there's already systems in place, and we kind of just fall into those practices or systems. And then what ends up happening is that we start, it's easy for us to complain and say like, oh, these things are not working, this team just doesn't know what they're doing, this is how it's impacting me. So I think for myself, what I want to do is go, where are the areas where, things aren't really serving me at the moment? And looking at it from this approach of, how can I think about this in a way that's gonna serve the collective? So if this thing is not working for me now, it means it's not working for the collective, it's not working for the team as a whole. So how can I apply parallel practice and this way of thinking that's going to say, how can I change this in a way that's going to serve our collective um, for the greater good, for the benefit of all, not just to make my life easier, not just to make my systems um, more efficient, but how will it serve the team? And, taking that into other, personal areas as well in our daily lives, where you might have tried something, or, you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you're not getting the results that you want. And looking at those areas from the perspective of, if this is not serving me, then it means it's not serving the whole, the collective. So how can I approach this in a way that's going to think about the highest good of all?
Yeah, as I'm reflecting on the conversation we're having now, I'm thinking there's the quote that comes to mind, which says, "You teach what you need to learn." And so these values, and especially the way we've been talking about it today, it can sound very big and very idealistic or lofty. So it's certainly inspirational or aspirational, sorry, for all of us. It's the things we aspire to learn and grow every day to become, not the things that we already are. So for me, it's also going to be inclusion. And the thing I've been thinking as I'm hearing you guys speak is, it can be so easy to gravitate towards people whose life view and worldview aligns to ours. And that's how you create these in groups and out groups. And especially when we're in larger organizations or, bigger groups of people, it can be so easy to then form an in group with the people that you align with, or that you really enjoy the way they operate and the way you operate. And what I'm going to do is be a little bit more deliberate about observing who I place in my in group or out group, and then being more welcoming, more open to diverse perspectives, and actually seeking out diverse perspectives and seeking to increase or expand my circle and show up with genuine kindness and warmth to people that I don't always agree with, or whose style of working and being doesn't always gel with mine, but just being intentional about being warm and open to it.
Sure. I think that's a perfect note for us to end this topic on. And just to recap for everyone that was listening, those were our 5 values, which is abundance through proliferation, parallel practice, inclusion, agency, and humanity. Those are the core values that Emergent Humanity Code is striving for, striving towards. And as always, guys, we know that these conversations, they can be a lot, they can be so much in there. And even just the 4 of us having these conversations, we can go on for hours. It's been months and even years for some of us, and we're still, having these questions, having these debates. So we can imagine how many questions you guys have. We can imagine all the thoughts that must be going through your mind. So if you want to reach out and connect, please do. Our comment section's open, our messages are open across social platforms as well. And if you want to be part of the community, please follow us on your preferred social media platform. And there's plenty more of these discussions to come. So look out for episode 3, which will be dropping in the next couple of weeks as well. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. This was amazing as always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you, everyone.